The ribbon was still tied when the warning hissed across the room. Helen Moore, 73, widow and former librarian, froze with the box in her lap. "Don't open it. Can't you see?" her daughter-in-law barked, snatching at the lid. But Helen's hands, steady from decades of turning fragile pages, wouldn't let go. When the tape finally tore, the room went silent. What spilled out wasn't just a gift. It was the truth they'd kept from her. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. It arrived on my doorstep, wrapped in ribbon, sealed with his handwriting, for Mother's Day, and yet something felt wrong. The box sat on the front step, like it had been waiting for her. It was mid-morning, still damp from the overnight rain, but the package was dry, shielded under the tiny awning above the porch. Joyce stood in her robe, hand on the screen door, staring at the bold, familiar handwriting scrawled across the label. Adam Holland, her son's name. Tucked beneath the twine and red ribbon was a small card for Sunday. "Love you always." The sight warmed her chest and stung all at once. Mother's Day wasn't until the weekend, but already something tugged at her gut. The packaging was meticulous, too meticulous. Fragile stickers on all sides, each corner sharp and clean, like it had been wrapped by a machine, not a man with two toddlers. She brought it inside and placed it gently on the dining table like it might break. The weight of it surprised her, not heavy, but not light either, dense, like secrets sealed in cardboard. That afternoon, Bailey stopped by. "I was just driving through," she claimed, though Joyce knew better. Bailey never came by without texting first, and never on a Thursday. Bailey's cheerful chatter died the moment her eyes landed on the box. She froze, keys still dangling in her hand. Her smile cracked. "Is that from Adam?" Joyce nodded slowly. "Came this morning." Bailey stepped closer, then stopped. Her face shifted barely a flicker, but Joyce saw it: fear, disbelief, regret. Bailey's voice dropped. "Don't open it." Joyce blinked. "Why not?" "Can't you see what this is?" she whispered. Then she quickly looked away, like she'd said too much. Joyce stepped toward her. "Bailey, I shouldn't be here." Bailey cut in, voice suddenly too loud. She picked up her purse, forced a grin. "Sorry, long day. Ignore me." She left without touching the box or saying goodbye. Joyce stood still in the kitchen for a long time, the sun shifting slowly across the tiles. Her thoughts churned, rearranged, tried to make sense of it. Then she took the box, walked it down the hall, and placed it on the top shelf of her hallway closet, behind an old winter coat. Out of sight, but not out of mind. That night, she watched television with the volume low and the lights dimmed, the box's weight pressing in even from the next room. Her mind looped through what Bailey had said, and not said. "Can't you see what this is?" At 10:42 p.m., she went to bed. At 11:09, she got back up. She peeked out through the front curtains on instinct, and across the street, parked beneath the shadow of the maple tree, was Bailey's car. Engine off, no lights on, just sitting there in the dark, like a watcher from some other world. Joyce didn't move, didn't open the curtain any farther, just watched. The woman in the driver's seat didn't get out. She didn't knock. She didn't leave. That night, Joyce finds Bailey's car, parked across the street, watching the house. She said not to open it, but she never said why, and I've never been good at leaving questions unanswered. Joyce stared at the closed hallway closet the next morning, as if it were breathing. The box hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound, but it was still there, pulsing in her mind like an unanswered question. Bailey's voice echoed, sharp and unfinished. "Can't you see what this is?" She made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and dialed her son. "Mom." Adam's voice came too quickly, too cheerfully, as if he'd been rehearsing it. "You got the box?" "I did, this morning," Joyce said slowly. "And? You like the wrapping? We had it done special." She asked, but he didn't answer. Instead, Adam laughed, forced and tight. "Don't open it till Sunday, okay? It's personal, thoughtful. You'll love it. She hesitated. Adam, what's in it? A surprise, he said. Then, as if checking a list, you'll understand when you see. But she already understood too much. It was in the way his voice stayed light, almost forced, like he was balancing on a ledge with a smile. That afternoon, Joyce met her friend Lorna at the diner off Ridge Avenue. The conversation was light, until Joyce brought it up casually. He sent me a box for Mother's Day, told me not to open it. Bailey told me not to either. Lorna blinked. Maybe it's a prank, or worse, a tax envelope. Joyce chuckled, but it felt hollow. On the way home, she gripped the steering wheel tightly. She walked in, dropped her keys in the bowl, and glanced down the hallway. The closet was ajar. Her heart climbed. The box once tucked behind her old parka was now resting on top of it, clearly moved, the ribbon slightly off-center. She hadn't touched it since the day before. Joyce's stomach tightened. She opened her security camera app and pulled up the motion feed. Her hands shook slightly as she scrolled through the timeline. At 2:14 p.m., when she'd been out, there she was, Bailey. She used her own key, one Joyce had given her years ago, in case of emergencies, and stepped inside. No knocking, no warning. The footage showed Bailey walking directly to the hallway closet, straight to the box. Joyce's breath hitched. She didn't open it, not full, but she ran her hands along it, studied it, turned it, then she shoved it on top of the shelf, adjusted the coat to cover less of it, and walked back out without a sound. The app showed the door closing, lock clicking. Joyce sat down slowly, the tea in her mug now stone cold. She stared at the paused footage, at the woman she thought she knew. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Then she typed, "You were in my house. What are you so afraid of?" She hit send, and waited. No typing dots, no reply, only silence. Joyce texts Bailey, "You were in my house. What are you so afraid of?" She answered right away. But every word reeked of guilt. The reply came at 1:17 a.m. "Wait, what? I wasn't in your house. Must have dropped something off. Are you okay?" Joyce read the message 3 times, each one duller than the last. The timestamp on her security feed said otherwise. Bailey had lied, and not even well. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned off the lamp by her bed, and lay still staring into the dark. But her mind never stopped moving. The next morning, she didn't drink her usual tea. She made black coffee instead, strong bitter, no sugar. The box still sat where Bailey had left it, a totem of secrets wrapped in floral paper. Joyce walked by it with care, but didn't touch it. She had a new plan. By noon, she'd reset the password on her security camera app. Then she created backups, one on a thumb drive, another on the cloud. Bailey couldn't walk in unnoticed again. If she did, Joyce would know, and next time, she'd be ready. That afternoon, she started watching Bailey, not out of paranoia, but with a quiet precision she hadn't used since her days as an ER nurse. Bailey's smiles looked off now. Her texts were shorter, clipped, overly sweet. It was like watching someone perform the role of concerned daughter-in-law, without reading the script. Joyce went online and ran a background check on herself, just to see what was publicly visible. Her jaw tightened when she saw a recent address update she hadn't filed. Something about her information was being nudged. Nudged where? At the grocery store 2 days later, she was buying crackers and canned soup when she heard a voice behind her. "Joyce." She turned and saw Bailey, holding a shopping basket. Her face dropped for the slightest second when she saw what was in Joyce's cart. Nothing fancy, but enough to suggest she hadn't left town. Bailey approached, smiling. "Wasn't expecting to see you here." Joyce smiled back. "Local store, local woman." There was an awkward pause. Bailey fidgeted. "Did you, open the box yet?" "No," Joyce said simply. "Why?" Bailey's lips twitched. "Just wondering." They parted ways after a few more strained sentences, but Joyce didn't miss it. That flicker in Bailey's eyes, the stiffness in her shoulder. She was hoping Joyce had opened it. Or maybe she was dreading it. Back home, Joyce placed the box on her dining table. She stared at it while the evening crept in, long and shadowed. It didn't hum or move, but its silence was heavier now. She turned off the overhead light, leaving only a lamp in the corner lit. Then she sat in the dark across from it, like an interrogation. By midnight, she was about to head to bed, when something caught her eye. The ribbon. It was crooked again, more than before. She walked to the table and leaned in. One strip of packing tape had been peeled back halfway. Not torn, not cut, peeled. Someone had tried to open it, quietly, carefully, then sealed it again badly. Joyce didn't speak. She didn't scream. She turned off the light. She didn't need to run. Now she was sure. Later that night, Joyce finds a single strip of packing tape, peeled back. I didn't tear it open. I cut it slow, like surgery. And what I found made me stop breathing. The blade slid under the tape with a steady hand. Joyce didn't know she still had. The silence of the house pressed in on her. 2:04 a.m., according to the blinking stove clock. No lights except the one above the sink. The box sat on the counter like a quiet dare. She had gloves on, not because of paranoia, because of preservation. She wanted no smudges, no contamination. If this was what she feared it was, she'd need every detail intact. Inside layers, tissue paper, folded with surgical neatness. Then a bundle of old family photos, some originals, some reprinted. She pulled them out gently. At first glance, they were ordinary birthday parties, holiday mornings, beach trips, but then her breath hitched. In the Christmas photo from 2009, she wasn't in the frame. She remembered that day, remembered Adam handing her the camera after she'd set the table. She had been the one to take it. But here the framing was tighter, cropped her out. Another picture. Lily's 10th birthday. She'd been standing behind the cake. In this version, the cake was visible. She wasn't, hands trembling. She laid them in a row across the table. One by one, missing, removed. Beneath the photos, a velvet box. Her heart clenched the moment she touched it. She opened it and stared. The necklace, thin gold, with a single teardrop sapphire. Her husband had given it to her on their 20th anniversary. She thought it had vanished during his final hospital stay, lost in a shuffle of grief and distraction. Tears pressed against her eyes, but didn't fall. Not yet. Beneath the box, a plain manila envelope. She opened it and slid out a thick stack of printed emails. They weren't labeled or redacted, just names, subject lines, dates. The correspondence was between Adam and someone listed only as T. The earliest email was from 2 months ago, the most recent 11 days ago. She's slowing down, getting forgetful. We can't risk her changing the will. Keep the story tight. Everyone thinks she's withdrawing anyway. If she finds out about the POA, deny everything. Mother's Day is the cleanest way to push the transition. Push the transition? Joyce reread it, each sentence twisting deeper. The final object in the box was another envelope. Legal grade, heavy paper. She opened it. A notarized document slid out. Her breath left her. Power of attorney, granting Adam complete authority over her medical, financial, and legal affairs. Her eyes locked on the date. 4 weeks ago. She read the signature at the bottom. Hers, except it wasn't. The J curled too stiff. The courage in her middle name looped wrong. The slant was off. Hers leaned forward. This one back. It was a forgery. Her hands stopped trembling. She stared at the page for a long time, heartbeat flattening into something cold, clinical. And then, without drama, without a tear, she folded it neatly back into its envelope. She looked around the room she'd lived in for over 40 years. Photos still lined the mantel. Books she loved still lined the shelf. But the air felt different now, like she didn't live here anymore. She walked to the back window. The streetlight caught her reflection faintly in the glass. Was this what being erased felt like? Not vanished, just slowly overwritten, until even the people who said they loved you thought you were already gone. She whispered it, barely audible, even to herself. They think I'm already gone. Joyce whispers, they think I'm already gone. A notarized document granting Adam full power of attorney, dated 4 weeks ago, forged with Joyce's signature. They rewrote our history, piece by piece, erased me from the story I built. Joyce stood at the dining table, the contents of the box laid out before her like pieces from a broken puzzle. The digitally altered photos, the forged power of attorney, her late husband's necklace, once thought lost, now returned like they hadn't just tried to take her life, they were rearranging it without her. She opened her filing cabinet and pulled out her original POA paperwork, the real one, drawn up 2 years earlier with her attorney. Her signature on that document was unmistakably her own. Bold, fluid, familiar. She placed the forgery beside it and studied the difference, not just clumsy calculated. She scanned both and uploaded them to a secure digital folder labeled Counter-Narrative. At the bank, the teller hesitated when she pulled up the account. There was an attempt to access your funds last week, she said cautiously. We flagged it for verification issues. When Joyce asked for a name, the woman lowered her voice. It was your son. Joyce thanked her, stepped outside, and stood in the parking lot, absorbing what she already knew but now couldn't unknow. That afternoon, she brought everything to her attorney, Margaret. One glance at the forged POA and Margaret's expression changed. That's not your handwriting, she said matter of fact. Joyce nodded. Margaret leaned back. You're not just dealing with a greedy heir. This is intentional fraud. Together they drafted a cease and desist letter. Margaret began mapping a timeline of misconduct, dates of access attempts, the forged legal filings, Bailey's warning, the altered photos. This wasn't spontaneous, it was premeditated betrayal. Back home, Joyce cleared space in her closet for a fireproof safe. Until it arrived, she stored everything, documents, the email chain, the necklace in a heavy lockbox. She created copies of every file and backed them up offline. That night she sat with a pen and journal and began writing, not to herself, but to whoever might one day ask how it all started. The next morning, she mailed one complete set of evidence to the P.O. box Margaret had set up. Redundancy, she reminded herself, was a form of survival. She sealed the envelope, dropped it into the blue mailbox, and walked away without a glance back. At home, while steeping her tea, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost let it go, but instinct made her pick up. Hi, this is Jordan from Daylight Realty, a bright voice said. Just confirming your house listing. We've got you on the calendar for photos this Friday, and we'll install the lockbox tomorrow. Joyce blinked. What listing? Jordan hesitated. Willow Drive. Correct? The paperwork was signed and submitted last week. Under your name. Her hand tightened around the mug. She gets a call from a realtor asking about the house listing she supposedly authorized. They didn't just want me out, they wanted to wear my life like a coat. Joyce called Adam and asked him to meet her for brunch. She kept her voice light, easy. No accusations, just it's been a while. He agreed, with a tone that tried too hard to sound casual. They met at a local cafe they used to visit when he was in college. She chose the booth near the window, the one he always liked. He slid in across from her, smiled like he still thought he could charm his way through anything. They ordered, made small talk. He complimented her asked if she was sleeping okay. Then she leaned forward and said it softly, without emotion. I know about the POA. His fork froze mid-air. And the house listing, she added. And the emails. He blinked, laughed too quickly. Mom, it's not what you think. We were just trying to help you simplify things. Downsize. Make life easier. She stirred her coffee, not looking up. Do you think I'm stupid? Or just disposable? He sighed, shaking his head. This is Bailey. She got paranoid. She pushed things. I didn't even read half of what she sent out. Joyce finally looked at him, her expression unreadable. You forged my name. Adam's charm cracked for a split second, enough for her to see the real him behind the mask. He stood up abruptly, muttering something about her being dramatic, tossed down a 20 and stormed out. Joyce remained seated. She finished her coffee slowly, then wrote a single sentence on the back of the receipt before leaving it on the table. Round 1. That evening, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Bailey standing on the porch, eyes red, shoulders shaking. I didn't want this, Bailey said through tears. Please, Joyce, don't ruin everything. That evening, Bailey shows up crying, begging her not to ruin everything. She cried like she was sorry, but sorrow doesn't come with secret passwords. Bailey stood on the porch, her eyes red, fists clenched around her coat sleeves. Joyce opened the door halfway, said nothing. Bailey stepped forward slightly, but didn't enter. I didn't know what he was doing at first, she said, voice trembling. But when I figured it out, I panicked. That's why I told you not to open the box. Joyce stayed silent, expression unreadable. Bailey looked down. Adam has debt, business loans, credit cards, things I didn't even know about until the mail started piling up. He told me he had a plan to fix everything, said it was just early estate management. Joyce's face didn't change. Bailey's voice cracked. I found out he was meeting with an estate planner. He pretended you were giving him consent to start transferring things. That's why the POA was in there. I didn't sign anything, but I didn't stop him either. Still nothing from Joyce. Bailey took a step back. I tried to put it back in the closet. I thought if you never saw it, maybe we could undo it all. Joyce nodded slightly, then said, I know. Bailey's breath caught. You do. Joyce's hand was still in her coat pocket, recording everything on her phone. I didn't want to be part of this. I swear, Bailey said, voice soft now. Joyce looked her over carefully. Then why didn't you come to me first? Bailey didn't answer. Joyce didn't ask again. She let the silence close the door. Joyce uploads the recording to a secure drive titled Final Leverage. I followed the money. It led exactly where I thought it would. The parking lot was nearly empty when Joyce pulled in behind the small brick building that used to house her husband's financial advisor. A new name was on the sign now, but the receptionist still remembered her husband. She was led back to a quiet office where a much older man sat, same face, more tired around the eyes. I need an audit, she said, of every retirement account I've had access to since 2000, and I want to know who's been trying to look into them. He gave her a long look, then nodded. An hour later she sat still while he pointed at several lines on the screen, each marked with alerts. These flags, he said quietly, are recent. Access attempts under the name Adam T. Weston. But you already knew that. Joyce nodded once, unauthorized, completely. They didn't pass the secondary security check, but they got close. Too close. She pressed her lips together, holding back the heat behind her eyes. What about life insurance? He tapped a few keys and brought up a new screen. There it was, multiple inquiry requests. Same name, same date range. Your son's been shopping for numbers he doesn't have the right to see, he said gently. Joyce leaned back in her chair. Let's fix that. For the next 2 hours they locked everything down. New passwords, 2-factor verifications on every portal, biometric scans where possible. Her accounts, pensions, mutual funds, insurance, all now locked behind security walls higher than Adam had the tools to climb. She left the office with her back straight, hands steady, and drove to the law office where her estate had been held for the last decade. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Dana with silver-streaked hair and a voice like cut glass, met her with a raised brow. Time to update the will. Joyce laid out a clean, typed copy of her revised beneficiaries. Adam and Bailey are to be removed entirely. They're not to receive a cent now or ever. My granddaughter Lily is the only one to remain, and the executor should be you. Dana looked over the paper, then reached for her pen, noted. Effective immediately. They went through it line by line, Joyce signing with crisp strokes. She didn't shake, she didn't smile, she simply ended the chapter. Once signed, she handed over a certified copy to Dana. Store that with your office files, she said. The original will go in a separate box. She drove across town to a private bank where her husband once kept a second lockbox for client documents. The staff remembered her name, and after a brief setup process, she signed a lease on a new safe deposit box. She placed the sealed envelope inside her new will, her final say, and turned the key with a click that echoed in her bones. When she got home that evening, the house was quiet. No messages, no visitors, until her phone buzzed. Adam, Mom, we need to talk, now. She stared at the screen. No panic. Just certainty. Adam sends a text. Mom, we need to talk. Now. I wasn't erasing a son. I was erasing a threat. Joyce chose a public park for the meeting, wide open. Midday sun, benches just far enough apart that no one had to pretend they were comfortable. Adam arrived 10 minutes late, sunglasses on, trying to look composed, but his jaw clenched when he sat. She didn't offer a greeting, she just pressed play on her phone. A soft voice, Bailey's, crackled through the speaker, admitting to everything. Adam flinched. Is this really necessary? Joyce looked at him, cold and level. You tried to erase me. Now I'm returning the favor. He scoffed. I'm your son. No, she said. You were. Before the forgery, before the inheritance meetings, before the box. He leaned forward. I made mistakes, but I'm not a criminal. You're not clever either, she said. But you were ambitious. Dangerous combination. His charm cracked then. You're blowing this out of proportion. We were just planning ahead. Protecting the family. By erasing the person who made it, she said softly. You called it estate planning. I call it theft. His voice turned sharp. So what now? You're going to cut me out? Pretend I don't exist? She stood. You did that first. That night, back home, she blocked his number permanently. No hesitation. The phone went silent with a satisfying finality. She opened her old notebook, the one with joint account info, shared passwords, family trust balances, and crossed out every name but hers. She made the calls, filed the form, closed the joint family trust she had quietly kept for Adam's benefit. What once connected them, money legacy trust, was severed with deliberate hands. Then she went further. Joyce filed for a restraining order, not just against Adam. She officially named Bailey as a participant in the financial misconduct, attaching the recorded confession and digital records from the accountant's audit. She submitted everything. 1 week later, a formal letter arrived from the county court clerk. Adam was to be served with a legal notice. He had been removed from Joyce's estate. She didn't send him a warning. She let the system deliver that truth. She stood in her kitchen, holding the paper with steady fingers, and whispered, "The court mails Adam a notice. His mother has legally removed him from her estate." I thought the whole tree was rotten, but one branch reached back. The envelope arrived quietly, nestled among coupons and bills. Her name was written in looping teenage cursive. No return address, just Lily at the bottom corner. Joyce sat down before opening it, already bracing herself, but the letter wasn't angry or confused. It was soft, curious, and brave. Hi Grandma, I hope it's okay I'm writing. I just miss you. A lot. Things are weird at home. Dad's been acting strange and Mom's always stressed. I don't really understand what's going on. I just know I miss when things felt normal. Can I maybe come see you sometime? Joyce's throat tightened as she folded the letter shut. Her hands rested on it like something sacred. She took out her best stationery and wrote back, "Dear Lily, I've missed you too, and I would love to see you, but things are a little complicated right now. I left to take care of myself. That doesn't mean I stopped loving you. It means I had to start loving me too." Lily responded within days, eager and hopeful. She suggested they meet at a museum downtown somewhere quiet, away from questions. Joyce agreed, setting ground rules, through a burner phone she'd purchased just for this contact. The day of the visit, Joyce arrived early. She watched the entrance nervously, wondering if this was a mistake. But then Lily appeared, taller than she remembered, eyes older but still full of light. "Grandma," she said, running to her. The hug was tight, real. No guilt, no agenda, just love. They wandered the museum slowly, pausing often. Lily talked about school, her friends, how things felt off at home. Joyce listened closely, offering gentle nods instead of advice. At lunch over sandwiches and tea, Lily leaned in and whispered, "I know what Dad did." Joyce didn't react. She simply reached across the table and held her granddaughter's hand. Later that week, Joyce went to her bank and opened a new account, quiet, private. She began setting aside money, not as a gift, as a future. It would go toward Lily's education, no strings attached. Lily hugs her tightly and whispers, "I know what Dad did." Out of the wreckage came the only person who saw me clearly. Lily became Joyce's quiet anchor in the weeks that followed. No drama, no demand, just a teenager slipping through the cracks of a broken home, finding refuge in her grandmother's calm. They met once a month, always somewhere neutral, a library, a park bench, the corner booth of a quiet cafe. Lily would talk, Joyce would listen. It was never about fixing anything, just holding space. One afternoon, Lily pulled out her phone and showed Joyce a string of screenshots. "Dad's panicking," she said, "about money, about you, about everything." Joyce scanned the messages. Adam had been texting Bailey frantically about lost investments, frozen accounts, and that woman starting a war. Lily wiped a tear away. "I don't know what's true anymore." Joyce closed the phone and laid it on the table. "You don't need to know everything right now. You just need to stay focused on your future." Lily nodded but didn't speak. After a long silence, she whispered, "Sometimes I wish you were my mom." Joyce didn't answer. She simply reached across the table and held her granddaughter's hand. That night, Joyce updated her will again. She removed everyone else. Left one name. Lily. The next morning, she had the new will notarized and filed, then sent a sealed copy to her lawyer. It was done. Weeks later, Joyce's phone rang just as she was setting a pot to boil. The caller ID was the high school. "This is the guidance office. We're trying to confirm that Lily is with you." Joyce's blood turned to ice. "Why?" "She's been marked absent. Her mother reported her missing." Joyce took a breath. "She's safe. She's with a friend. I have texts and permission logs if you need them." There was a pause. "We might," the counselor said. "And Joyce, you should probably know this isn't the first concern raised about the home." Joyce stood in her kitchen, staring out the window at the fading autumn leaves. The world was finally seeing what she already knew. Joyce gets a call from Lily's school. Bailey reported her missing. "I told the truth, and the truth set something on fire." Joyce arrived at the school that afternoon with a folder under her arm and her back straight. She met the counselor in a small office that smelled faintly of copier toner and peppermint tea. She laid the printouts on the desk, screenshots of Lily's messages, confirmations of the museum visit, and text logs showing Joyce had never once kept Lily overnight without permission. The counselor scanned the papers, then looked up. "This helps. A lot." Joyce folded her hands. "Bailey's afraid of what Lily knows." The counselor didn't argue. She simply said, "We've started a formal note on the file. Thank you for coming in." That night, word began to spread. Quietly, carefully, but unmistakably, Child Services had visited the house. Neighbors watched as a plain sedan idled in front of Adam and Bailey's driveway. 2 caseworkers stepped out with folders and clipboards. Joyce didn't gloat. She didn't speak to anyone about it. She just sat by her window with a cup of tea, watching leaves drift across the porch. Then came the collapse. Adam's business, already brittle, broke open under the pressure of a brewing scandal. A vendor accused him of falsifying records. A client pulled out of a major deal. Rumors swirled, amplified by a recent public argument overheard at the coffee shop. Bailey had shouted, "You said this would fix everything." Joyce said nothing. She let the consequences speak in her place. Meanwhile, Lily stayed with a friend. Joyce checked in daily. Quiet texts, words of encouragement, never overstepping, just presence. One night Lily messaged, "I'm okay. Just tired of pretending." Joyce responded, "You don't have to anymore." Then came the envelope. Smooth, neutral, formal. Inside was an invitation, family mediation. An effort, they said, to rebuild harmony. Joyce didn't hesitate. She tore it in half, dropped it in the trash, and turned back to her stew simmering on the stove. Some families aren't rebuilt. Some are Joyce receives an invitation to a family mediation session. She declines. "I didn't need a courtroom. I had the truth, my voice, and a bank full of silence." The cottage sat near the edge of a bluff, just 3 hours from everything she used to call home. It had blue shutters, a porch swing, and silence that felt earned. Joyce signed the closing documents with a pen she brought from her late husband's desk. When the final paper slid across the table, she didn't flinch. She just exhaled. It was done. No forwarding address, no traceable trail. Adam and Bailey wouldn't know where she'd gone, only that she had gone. Lily knew. The girl had been given the location with one rule: never tell them, not even accidentally. Joyce set up her small new life without drama. She filled bookshelves, unpacked old photos, and put fresh linens in the guest room. She left her phone on silent for hours at a time. The stillness was no longer loneliness. It was her reward. Each morning she walked to the shoreline collecting driftwood or shells. In the afternoons she volunteered at the local reading center, helping children find stories that could carry them somewhere safer. She took up painting again, not for galleries or praise, but for herself. Her fingers remembered the rhythm, the texture of brush and canvas. One by one she changed everything. New phone number, new mailing address, new digital footprint. She closed old email accounts and opened ones with names no one in her family had ever heard. There was nothing left to follow. One gray morning, a delivery van rumbled up the narrow coastal road. The driver stepped out and handed her a sealed brown box. No return address. Joyce signed for it and stood there on the porch, fingers resting on the taped seam. She didn't open it right away. She placed it on the kitchen table, made tea and sat across from it. For a long while she just looked. It didn't feel like a threat this time. It felt like an echo. A delivery driver hands her a box. No return address. I thought I was done with boxes, but this one set me free. Joyce sliced the tape carefully, methodically, like she was unwrapping a wound that had finally scabbed over. Inside she found an envelope marked in Bailey's handwriting. For when you're ready. Beneath it, old family photos, some faded, some freshly reprinted. Most of them included Joyce this time, her face restored where it had once been erased. A quiet apology before the words arrived. She opened the envelope slowly. Inside, a letter in Bailey's unsteady script. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to explain. I knew what Adam was doing. I didn't stop him. I should have. I was scared of losing him, of being blamed, of everything unraveling. But it did anyway, and I helped it happen. Joyce read on. I've left him. For real, I don't want to live in secrets anymore. I don't know how to fix anything, but I do know I won't stay part of what broke you. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. No manipulation, no defense, just a tired confession. Joyce folded the letter neatly and walked outside to her fire pit. The wind was gentle. The flames were ready. She burned the apology not out of anger, but as ritual. Not everything has to be kept to be remembered. Before tossing the last flickering edge into the ash, she pulled one photo from the pile. Her and Adam on a beach. When he was no older than 5, she'd been holding his hand, pointing at something just beyond the frame. He was laughing. She kept that photo. She placed it in a drawer next to her updated will, beneath Lily's education documents and the deed to the cottage. Then she turned back to the box and found a second envelope. Inside was a printed college application essay. Across the top in bold, "The woman who saved me." She blinked. Everyone talks about survival like it's a solo act, but mine wasn't. She never kicked in doors or raised her voice. She just stayed still, solid, unmoving, while everything around me cracked. And when I was ready to reach out, she was there. Not judging. She didn't just teach me how to survive, she showed me what it means to walk away. Joyce placed the essay gently on her table and stared out the window. No words came, only warmth. The last envelope in the box contains Lily's application essay, titled "The Woman Who Saved Me." Joyce reads the final line. She didn't just teach me to survive, she showed me what it means to walk away. The first Mother's Day I spent alone was the first time I felt truly seen. Joyce woke early to the hum of ocean air seeping through the open window, salt in the breeze, birds chattering like old friends. There were no alarms, no tasks, no forced brunches, just silence. She brewed her favorite coffee, poured it into the floral mug Lily had given her last fall, and carried it to the porch. The sea rolled in the distance. The cottage breathed with her. She didn't check her phone at first. She didn't need, but when she finally did, it was there. A call from Lily. Joyce answered with a smile already forming. "Good morning." Lily's voice was bright. "Happy Mother's Day." "I got in." Joyce sat straighter. "College. Full scholarship. And I used the essay." Joyce didn't ask which one. She already knew. They talked for 20 minutes about dorms, courses, a roommate who liked vintage horror movies, and whether Lily would visit again in June. They laughed easily. Naturally, like family that chose each other. After the call, Joyce made herself breakfast. Eggs, toast, the jam she'd canned over winter. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. Not rushed, not serving anyone but herself. She placed a single flower in a vase by the window. Wild, unarranged, beautiful anyway. She didn't think about Adam at all. Not his silence, not his betrayal, not what he'd become. That story was done. She walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a fresh leather-bound journal. The first page was still crisp, the spine not yet bent. She uncapped a pen and wrote, "They thought they sent me a trap, but they delivered my beginning." She let the words dry, then closed the book with care. Outside, gulls wheeled through the sky. The ocean kept moving. So did she. She seals the journal, and whispers "Happy Mother's Day" to me. Judith, with Rosalind's help, regained partial access to her own bank, her pension, and Alan's remaining trust assets. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Nora walked with her to the bank, one quiet Friday morning. Judith withdrew $40 in cash, and held it in her hands like a trophy. "It's weird," she said, a little stunned. "This feels like power." "It is," Nora said. "And we're just getting started." Rachel's once flawless image began to unravel publicly. Paparazzi caught her exiting a luxury salon, while her legal team insisted she was too emotionally distressed for interviews. 2 other former employees of Sable Point anonymously released emails that hinted at data manipulation, intimidation tactics, and most damning, Rachel's pattern of targeting vulnerable people with reputational leverage. She was no longer the grieving daughter. She was a story now. Then came the collapse. Her nonprofit foundation, a women's empowerment initiative she'd launched after Alan's death, was suspended indefinitely for financial inconsistencies. The IRS quietly launched an audit. The state bar opened a review of her relationship with a paralegal, who had quietly drafted estate documents Judith never saw. Even people who once stood behind Rachel began to inch backward, their silence now flavored with self-preservation. One afternoon, Rachel came to the house. She let herself in, still had a key, and stood in the doorway as if nothing had changed. Judith was at the dining table, sorting papers into piles labeled Court, Truth, and Recovery. Rachel didn't sit. "You feel proud of yourself?" she asked, her voice brittle. Judith looked up slowly. "I feel free." Rachel scoffed. "You don't even see it, do you? Without me you'd be buried in bills, still grieving, still frozen in that pathetic silence you wore like a damn badge." Judith said nothing. Rachel stepped closer, eyes glassy with rage. "You'll always be weak." Judith met her gaze, steady, no flinch. "And you'll always be alone." Rachel's mouth tightened, her hands clenched at her sides. Then she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. That night, Judith sat by the window with Nora, a cup of warm cider in her hands, watching the breeze rustle the trees outside. They didn't speak for a long while, until Nora finally asked, "You okay?" Judith nodded once. "For the first time in a long time, I think so." Then her phone buzzed. A text from Rosalind. Rachel missed her scheduled deposition. Her attorney says she's unreachable. Judith stared out into the dark. Rachel was gone. Rachel storms out and vanishes. "I thought the story was over until I saw what she'd left behind." The key came in a plain envelope with no return address. Just her name on the front. Judith Whitman, written in Rachel's unmistakable handwriting. No note, no explanation. Inside, a small brass key taped to a post-it with one word scrawled on it, Judith stared at it for a long time, before calling Nora. The storage facility sat just off the highway, nestled between a shuttered drive-in theater and a row of self-serve car washes. The kind of place built to hide things that mattered once, and were too painful to throw away. They checked in at the front desk, signed the waiver and walked down a concrete corridor until they reached Unit 4. Judith slid the key into the lock, her hands cold despite the late summer heat. The door groaned open. Inside, boxes, neatly stacked, labeled, organized. The way Rachel always did everything, meticulously, obsessively. One box caught Judith's eye immediately. It was marked in bold red marker, for Mom Final. She lifted the lid slowly. Inside were photo albums, school drawings, Mother's Day cards, and letters. Dozens of them. Some addressed to Alan, some to herself. All written in Rachel's sharp, measured hand. But one was on top, dated just 2 weeks before the court hearing. Mom, I never hated you. I just stopped waiting for you to become someone who would stop him. So I became that person for myself. But once I started winning, I didn't know how to stop. I thought power would make me feel safe. Instead, it just made me meaner, sharper, smaller. You fought back. I didn't think you would. Part of me is glad you did. If you're reading this, it means I lost. But maybe that's okay. I didn't want revenge. I wanted control. Because control felt like safety. I think you know that feeling too. Judith folded the letter carefully, pressing it to her chest. In the next box, Nora pulled out a folder filled with legal documents. Donation transfers made in Rachel's name. Look at this, she said, flipping through. She emptied most of Alan's remaining estate funds. All of it went to women's shelters, survivor funds, legal aid foundation. Each transaction dated before the lawsuit, before the media storm. Rachel hadn't run with the money. She'd given it away. Judith sank onto the floor of the unit, surrounded by old ballet shoes, college essays, a dried corsage from Rachel's prom. Why would she do this? She whispered. Nora set the file down beside her. Maybe she thought punishing him meant erasing everything he left behind, even herself. Judith said nothing for a long time. Then she opened one final file, tucked at the bottom of the bin. It contained a scanned passport, Rachel's photo, but a different name, issued internationally. No record of return. Rachel hadn't just left the courtroom. She had left the country. One file reveals Rachel secretly donated all the estate money to survivors of her father's victims. Judith stares at the papers and whispers, she was punishing him, not just us. The empire she built on silence and fear was starting to sink, and I wasn't going down with it. It started with a letter from the IRS. Rosalind opened it first, scanning the contents with a practiced eye before handing it to Judith with a quiet nod. They're auditing all accounts tied to Rachel, and reviewing the estate distributions for fraud. Judith read every line 3 times. She didn't smile, but for the first time in months her shoulders lowered a fraction. It had begun. Over the next week everything started to crack. Rachel's business properties were flagged, leases re-evaluated, investors spooked. Some publicly pulled out. Others sent quiet, apologetic emails asking to pause further collaboration until things settle. Her nonprofit, once praised in glossy magazines, was suspended pending financial review. The final blow came when a local journalist released an exposé connecting Rachel to other vulnerable clients she'd advised. At least 2 elderly women had transferred their assets under similar power of attorney agreements. Their families came forward. She's a pattern, Rosalind said, tapping the paper. Not an anomaly. Judith, meanwhile, began reclaiming slivers of her life. Her name was restored on her bank accounts. Her own legal counsel, Rosalind, no longer operating in shadows, officially filed a motion to revoke Rachel's power of attorney. Judith began receiving texts again. A former neighbor invited her for coffee. Elaine sent a one-word message. Sorry. Even Melanie left a voicemail. Her voice cracked with regret. I should have trusted you. Judith didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. She needed silence now, not because it was comfortable, but because it was hers. Rael returned to the house on a Thursday. No announcement. No message, just the sound of her heels on the porch and the front door swinging open like nothing had changed. Judith was in the kitchen, slicing an apple, calm. Rachel stood in the doorway, thinner than before, her eyes bloodshot behind immaculate eyeliner. "So, this is how it ends?" she asked. Judith set down the knife. "You still think you're the one ending things?" Rachel scoffed, arms folded. "You needed me, still do. Without me you're just a woman playing catch-up with a world that's moved on." Judith stepped closer, steady. "And without me you're just noise in a room no one believes anymore." They stood inches apart. "You'll always be weak," Rachel said, her voice low, acidic. Judith didn't flinch. "And you'll always be alone." Rachel's face barely moved. Then, without a word, she turned and walked out. The door slammed behind her, echoing down the hallway like a gavel. Judith waited until morning before checking with Rosalind. No activity on Rachel's accounts, no updates from her lawyer. Her phone number had been disconnected. The last camera footage Nora had retrieved from a nearby ATM showed Rachel withdrawing cash, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Then nothing. No trail. No forwarding address. No social media. Rachel had vanished. Not just from Judith's life. From everything. Rachel storms out, and vanishes. "I thought the story was over until I saw what she'd left behind." The envelope arrived with no stamp, no return address, just a single sheet of paper inside with a short, handwritten note. "Mom, if you've made it this far, I left you something. Unit 4-2. Below the message was a brass key taped to the page. No explanation, no apology, just a breadcrumb left in Rachel's unmistakable hand. Judith sat in silence, the key growing warm in her palm. A part of her wanted to throw it away, to shut the door on all of it, but another part, the part that still needed to understand, slipped the key into her purse and reached for her phone. The storage facility was an hour out of town, tucked between a gravel truck lot and an abandoned laundromat. It was the kind of place designed to disappear into the landscape. Judith signed in under a fake name and followed a teenager in a security vest to Unit 4-2. The metal door screeched as it lifted. Inside, boxes, dozens of them. Neatly stacked, numbered, late childhood, legal sealed letters, Dad, final Mom. Judith reached for the last box with shaking hands. Inside were photos, letters, handwritten cards from kindergarten, a small stuffed bear she'd long thought lost in a movie, and then a flash drive, tucked into a plain white envelope, marked Play Alone. Back at Nora's house, Judith plugged it into her laptop and sat by the window as the file loaded. The screen stayed black, but Rachel's voice crackled to life. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. Not dead, just gone in the way people disappear when they've finished what they came to do." Her tone was flat, unemotional. "You fought harder than I ever thought you would. I thought you'd collapse, or forgive me, or beg. I didn't expect you to fight back. But I'm glad you did. I never wanted revenge, Mom. Not really. I just wanted control, because that felt like safety to me. When everything else in life fell apart, when you ignored what Dad did, when I was small and afraid, I learned the only person I could trust was myself." Her breath caught slightly. The first sign she was still human. "I left before the courts could drag it out, before I said something I couldn't unsay. I used the passport from Sable Point, the one you never knew I had. Don't try to find me, you won't. But if you're listening to this, I want you to know something. I didn't take the money. I gave it all away, to the women Dad manipulated. The ones he promised deals to and destroyed. I tracked them all down. Every last one. I didn't punish you, Mom. Not really punished him. Even if he's not here to see it. You just got caught in the fire." Judith closed the laptop and sat very still. She didn't cry. Not right away. Instead, she pulled out one of the printed donation receipts from the box. Each wire transfer, tens of thousands, had been routed to women's shelters, survivor advocacy centers, pro bono legal aid funds. Rachel hadn't stolen the estate. She'd repurposed it with surgical precision, quietly, without credit, without glory. Judith looked over the papers again and again, stunned at the trail. One transaction had even been made in her name. not Rachel's. Judith Whitman, donor. As if Rachel had been rewriting both of their legacies behind the scenes. Later that night, Judith sat alone on the back porch, the stars blurred behind thin clouds. She held one of Rachel's old letters in her lap, folded so many times the crease had worn through. I never knew her, she whispered aloud. Not fully, not really, and maybe she never would. But as she stared at the files one last time, a bitter clarity took root in her chest. She was punishing him. Judith murmured, voice cracking. Not just us. Judith stares at the papers and whispers, she was punishing him. Not just us. One file reveals Rachel secretly donated all the estate money to survivors of her father's victims. There was no victory, only freedom, and sometimes that's enough. Judith's new house didn't have a foyer or crown molding, or a guest room no one used. It had a slanted porch with chipped railings, and a narrow kitchen where the windows fogged when she boiled water. The mailbox tilted to one side like it was tired of standing, and the trees out back shed enough leaves in October to bury the entire yard. It wasn't perfect, but it was her. The deed was in her name. She unpacked slowly, letting each item claim its space. A chipped teacup from college, her mother's quilt, a photograph of Rachel at 6 years old, grinning beside a pumpkin she could barely lift. She hung that photo in the hallway, not to forgive, not to forget, but because it was real. And for the first time in years, Judith wanted real over perfect. She signed up to volunteer at the library, mostly filing returned books and helping older patrons use the computer. On Tuesdays she read to the preschoolers, her voice growing steadier with each page she turned. The kids didn't know her story. They just laughed when she made animal voices, and clapped when she finished a book. It felt like starting from scratch, but at least it felt like starting.
Nora stayed close.
She stopped by every Friday with coffee and updates on her latest obsession, knitting hats for premature babies, repainting her back deck, digging into an unsolved 1990s. You don't have to do this alone, she reminded Judith often, without ever making it sound like pity. Judith believed her. The silence no longer hurt. It just made room. The media lost interest weeks after Rachel vanished. There was no new footage, no extradition, no warrant that led anywhere. The story faded like old ink, replaced by newer scandals and fresher drama. People stopped whispering when Judith walked into the grocery store. Neighbors began waving again. Some friendships returned, cautiously, others didn't. And that, she decided, was okay. She didn't need a chorus anymore, she just needed a voice, her own. It took her months to gather the courage to visit Alan's grave. When she finally did, it was just after dawn, fog still clinging to the grass like a ghost reluctant to let go. She stood by the headstone with gloved hands, a thermos of coffee tucked beneath her coat. No flowers, no speech, just breath and memory. I don't hate you, she said, barely louder than the wind, but I wish I had left sooner. I wish I had been loud. I wish I had protected her, before she learned to protect herself with a knife. A crow called in the distance, sharp and sudden. Judith didn't flinch. I forgive you, she said at last. And I forgive myself too. Then she poured the coffee into the ground beside his grave. A strange ritual she couldn't explain but felt necessary, and turned to go. The sky was pale as she walked back to the car. No messages waited, no cameras followed, just the world, turning again. Rachel was gone, somewhere far, probably watching, or not. Maybe she'd burned every bridge, maybe she'd built a new one. Judith didn't know, and she didn't need to. As she opened the car door, Judith looked back one last time at the cemetery gates. Rachel's words echoed, "We'll handle things from now on." She'd thought it was a takeover, but maybe it had been a handoff all along. Judith stepped into the car, started the engine and whispered into the quiet, "She handled things, now so will I." Judith walks away from the cemetery and thinks, "She handled things, now so will I."